Anyway, I informed Steve that I was running for mayor of Bessemer, Alabama, and somehow he felt that qualified me automatically to introduce the congressman. So I don't know. But anyway, thank you, Steve. We appreciate that. In Bessemer, Alabama, there's a hero by the name of Bo Jackson. And many years ago, back in the 80s, there was a big campaign with Nike. It's called Bo Knows. It's a Bo Knows tennis, Bo Knows baseball, Bo Knows football, Bo Knows. That reminds me, I was speaker today. Our congressman, he knows baseball. I'll tell you why. He was a baseball player that was also drafted to play for the Atlanta Braves. Our congressman also knows education. He received a BS from Texas Christian University. We later returned to become the baseball coach at TCU. Our speaker, Congressman Rogers, knows family values and the value of having a great family. Williams and his wife, Patsy, live in Weatherford, Texas. They have two daughters who attend at TCU. He also attended the University of Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas. The congressman knows public service. Yes, he was served as the regional finance chairman for then Governor George W. Bush in 1994, and in 1998, he became North Texas chairman for the Bush-Cheney 2000 campaign, the North Texas finance chair in 2004, and the National Grassroots Fundraising Chairperson for the 2004 campaign. Also, Congressman was appointed by the President George W. Bush in 2001 to be chair of the Republican National Finance Committee Eagles Program. He also served as the state finance chair for the John Conyers U.S. Senate campaign as the national director of the Patriot Program. He was also appointed by the then Governor Perry to the Texas Motor Vehicle Board, and also William was appointed to be the fourth Secretary of the State by Governor Perry. Rogers knows automobile business, which is important to us. For 40 years, he has owned and operated his own family-owned automobile dealership that was started by his father in 1939. William knows the importance of having smart people running our government. So much he ran and was elected to his first term in Congress in November 2012. Immediately, he was served as the House Budget Committee and the U.S. House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. Congressman Williams is a man about getting business done in Washington, D.C. To paraphrase a friend of mine by the name of Henry Mullinax from Anderson, Alabama, you can take a boy out of the country, but you can't take a country out of the boy. As a man, or as mans and business people here, we know you can take a man out of the business, but you can't take the business out of the man, even when you go to Washington, D.C. NIADA, help me welcome our businessman in Washington, D.C., Congressman Roger Williams, the 25th District of Texas. Give him a hand.
Thank you, Mayor.
Gee, look at those people.
Well, thank you, Mayor, for that nice introduction, and congratulations. I want to be one of the first to congratulate you for being called Mr. Mayor. You're going to do a fantastic job, and thank you for running. Appreciate it. And also, Steve, I want to thank you for your leadership in this group, and thank all of you for being here. And I got to tell you a story real quick. I'm a big economic development guy, just like all of you are. And my wife, when I was Secretary of State of Texas, my wife came to Washington to see me one day, and we went out to dinner. And we had a real nice restaurant called the Palm Restaurant. Some of you have been there. It's a nice place. Had a kid waiting on us doing a really, really good job. And halfway through the meal, I said, "Son, you're doing a great job. I want to know a bit about you." He said, "Well, I just got a MIT. I'm working this job because I want to create some operating capital because I'm going to start a business in Oklahoma." And he says, "But I hear that people should go to Texas, too." And I heard all that. So he went on, and I told my wife, I said, when he brought the bill, I said, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do. You heard what he had to say. I think what I'm going to do is give him a big tip and tell him I'm the Secretary of State of Texas." And my wife said, "I got a better idea. Why don't you give him no tip and tell him you're Secretary of State of Oklahoma?" Economic development. Now, the other thing is, You heard about my baseball career. I played at TCU and got drafted in 1971 from the Atlanta Braves and signed my first major league contract in 1972 for $12,000. Now, that was a lot of money back then. I see some of you gray-haired guys, you know that was a lot of money back then. So the guy that signed me died several years ago, a fellow named Bobby Bragan. Bobby Bragan was an Alabama man. He's in the Alabama Hall of Fame. And I asked him, I was giving a speech on his behalf at a high school auditorium, and I asked him the question that all of us guys that played in the 50s and 60s and 70s ask ourselves when you watch sports. I said, Mr. Bragan, you know how I played. I said, if I was playing today, what would I make? I mean, that's a question we all ask, the guys like me that played back then. He said, well, kid, it's a different game. He said, you could do some things. You could run, hit, and throw. You could do some things, but it's a totally different game. But he said, knowing how you played, if you played in this environment, as different as it is, he said, I think you would make $12,000. So a little bit about my career. And the other thing is, I like to tell one more baseball story. Satchel Paige, some of you guys remember Satchel Paige? Satchel Paige in 1948 won a doubleheader in Yankee Stadium. You don't do that anymore. He won both games. He won a doubleheader, and in the locker room, the press is interviewing him. They said, Satch, you won both games today. What was your best pitch? Was it your fastball or your curveball? And Satchel Paige said, oh, it was neither one. It was my B-ball. And the writer said, your B-ball? What the heck is your B-ball? He said, my B-ball is, when I throw it, it goes where I want it to be. And I can't think of any place I'd rather be today than with my fellow auto dealers right here in Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for having me here. Now, let me briefly just tell you, I sold my first used car in 1971 to a lady named Mrs. Weiler. I remember it like it was yesterday. Made $25 on it, and I was scared to death selling it to her. I know what over allowance is. I know what under allowance is. I know what it's like to do a contract by hand. I don't know if any of you remember a Wang machine, but the Wang machine was the first machine that we could punch things in. It would print a contract out, and I can still remember how it sounds. And I knew my daddy would say, I knew we're doing business, because I can hear that Wang machine. That was a sound to him. And I remember some of you guys and gals, remember when your friends would call you and say, hey, I need a good $1,000 car for my kid. You remember those days? We've come a long way, haven't we? I remember when you wanted to put a fellow out on a note for 36 months, that was for eternity. You couldn't do that. Car wouldn't last that long. And I remember when we had no cafe standards, no miles per gallon that we had to mess with. And I remember selling cars when gasoline was 35 cents a gallon. And I remember when it went to $1 a gallon and everybody was bringing in their Eldorados and Caprices to buy Chevettes, what it was like. Everybody said, well, the world's going to go to heck. It'll be blood on the freeway if we have to pay $1 for gasoline. I paid 20% interest, just like all of you did, but I made it through it. I also remember when you didn't quote APR, Mayor, you quoted add-on. You remember 7.5% add-on. Nobody knew what APR was. I remember those days. I also remember 9/11, when President Bush turned to the auto industry and said, make sure we don't go in a funk. Please help us sell cars and trucks. And we pulled America out of the financial problems in 9/11 when we were asked to do that. And I remember when I was running for Congress, I had an opponent 3 days before the election. He had the final argument. We had a debate, the final argument. I was sitting right there, and he looked at me, and he said, look at this man. Is this what you want to say to Congress? This man's an insider. This man's a friend to President Bush. This man's a multimillionaire, and he's a used car dealer. Is that what you want to send to Congress? So I had the final argument, and I got up and I said, well, my opponents labeled me. You heard everything he said about me. But only one thing of those things he said is true. I am a used car dealer. Broke the House down. 3 days later, I got 61% of the vote, and you got a used car dealer in the United States Congress. I know that you got to sell them one at a time. And I also know that the car industry is here to stay, and as the car business goes, America goes. And don't ever forget that. So with that all being said, let me just briefly talk to you about why I ran for Congress. I was Secretary of State of Texas when I had found out I was always sitting where you were. I was always helping people, and they'd say, Roger, I need your support. Roger, I need your money. Roger, I need your name. Roger, can you have an event for me at your house? And I would do that. But you know what? I found out a lot of people I was helping, they weren't doing what they told me to do when they got up to Washington. So I decided I'd run for Congress because I didn't think anybody was fighting for small business, and I knew, and nobody was fighting for the car industry. And I had to get up there, and that's really the reason I ran. We have 4 auto dealers, 4 used car dealers in Congress. Myself, one from Florida, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. 4 of us fighting the fight. And I'm fighting for America every single day, but I'm fighting for our industry every single day. So that's the reason I ran. I had a pretty simple platform. It was lower taxes, less government, cut the spending, defend the borders, listen to your generals, understand the 10th Amendment, and always stand with Israel. And that's where I am every single day. That's where my office is. And I'm always fighting for certain issues. I'm fighting about jobs. I'm a job creator like you are, and I'm telling you, unless we get this economy turned around, the economy is not turned around, it's going to be us that turns it around. Jobs are what we're going to have to put people to work with, and we've got to have an economy and a platform that will let us do it. So I'm fighting every single day for a lot of things, but mainly I'm fighting for true tax reform. I'm fighting for getting the government out of health care. There is no reason the United States government should be in health care. Look it, individuals need to own their own health care, not your business. You don't need to be supplying it to anybody. Individuals need to own their own health care. We need to have competition. We need to shop across state lines. We know what competition does, right? Competition brings prices down and services up. We need to make health care portable, so if you lose your job or leave or whatever, you carry it with you. You don't have to get involved in COBRA. And we need to make it tax deductible. That's what health care needs to look like in America. Get the government out of it and get we as employers out of it. Let individuals own their own health care. That's where we need to take it. I'm also fighting every day to energize the energy business. I'm tired of this business industry getting attacked. We're penalizing the energy business. We need to energize the energy business. There are so many jobs out there for us to be created through the energy sector. And I believe it's the railroads 150 years ago. And we need to get the government out of the energy business. I, for one, I'm for an all the above approach. I'm for an all-American approach. Look, I'm for bio, I'm for wind, I'm for solar, I'm for everything. But the difference is I don't want the government to tell me where we need to be the next 50, 2,500 years from now. I want the private sector to tell me where we need to be. And while we're doing it, we need to drill, and we need to be the most dominant player in the world when it comes to energy. We must be that. And then we need to strengthen our military. We need to strengthen our military because I'm going to tell you, if America does not stay the superpower in the world, this world will implode. And the problem is today, people do not fear us, and our friends do not trust us. And we cannot have a weak military and have a strong America. And we must strengthen our military, and we need to remind the young men and women that are fighting for freedom and liberty every single day that we love them. I have Fort Hood in my district, the largest military base in the United States of America. Today, 48,000 of the best and brightest we had to offer in Fort Hood, Texas, training to defend this country. We need to continue to support our veterans. We need to support our active military, and we need to have the strongest military in the world. I'm fighting for that every single day. The other thing we need to do is we need to find out why in Texas 100,000 kids are dropping out of the 9th grade every single day, every single year. They're dropping out because they're losing hope. Nobody should lose hope in America, the greatest country in the world. That's why we're focused on community colleges, making sure that it's okay for these young men and women to know you don't have to be a business person. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to own your own car lot. You can be a plumber. You can be a carpenter. You can be somebody. You can hire people and put people to work and realize the American dream. And every state is like that. And we've got to focus on community colleges, focus on these kids who are dropping out of school, and not give them so much help, but give them hope. That's what we need. And then the last thing we need to do, and Washington needs to do that, that's why I'm on the budget committees, we need to balance the books of America. Let me tell you, I balance every day. You balance every day. You balance every week. You balance every month. You balance every year. But we haven't had a budget in America the last 5 years. Are you kidding me? We finally got a budget out this past cycle. But we're $17 trillion in the hole. And we're going further and further and further in debt, and we just talk about more taxes, more taxes, more taxes, more burden on us. Not going to happen. We've got to balance the books of America. America's got to quit drawing on their line of credit. They got to, when they hit their line of credit like all of us do, we got to cut expenses. That's where your cash is. There's plenty of waste, fraud, and abuse we can cut in America and begin to balance the books. See, I think the world, our parents and grandparents came from the world's greatest generation. Our generation's having a hard time delivering to our kids. I think one of the greatest things we could deliver, and maybe be the next world's greatest generation, is if somebody's starting school today in kindergarten, by the time they go to high school and into college, with the year they graduate, if we could reduce our debt $1 trillion a year, we can deliver them a debt-free America. What better gift would that be to our kids? And we need to focus on that. So what I'm saying to all of you, that's what I'm fighting for every single day, and you can count on me. One thing I'm very much involved in is tax reform. We've got to have true tax reform in America. We talk about it, but we don't do it. We are overtaxed. We don't have enough. We don't have everybody paying. I think everybody should pay something. Everybody should invest in the greatest country in the world. But we've got to have true tax reform. And what I'm out there talking about, we were on Fox Business the other night talking about this. See if this wouldn't work for your company. This works for Gates. This works for Williams. It works for the guy walking down the street. But we got to quit talking loopholes in America and trying to penalize people for taking tax deductions. We got to talk cash flow in America. If we're not going to get ourselves out of debt, then we got to create more cash flow. That's why I'm out there every single day, and you're going to see this. We call it Jumpstart America. You're going to see this come out this summer. We're talking about a 30% corporate tax rate. Whatever deductions you're taking, you take them. I'm fine with that. 30% corporate tax rate. We're talking about individual tax rate too. One at 20 on the first million, 30 on the next million. We're talking about cutting the capital gains tax back down to 15 from 18. I think it should be 0, but I can't sell that. I'm a good salesman, but I can't sell that. But we know 15 works. So cut the cap gains from 18 to 15, cut the dividends from 18 to 15. We're talking about cutting the payroll tax not only for the employee, but for the employer, for all of us. We want to cut that in half. If we cut that in half, that's more money for your employer, that's more money for the employee, more money for the employer. In one of my little businesses, $16,000 a month that I wouldn't have to match. That's money in the bank. That goes to bottom line profit. I pay tax on it, and if you're like me, you don't save money, you spend money. We invest it in lifts. We invest it in inventory. We invest it in infrastructure. We invest it in people. And we can begin to bring unemployment down. So let's bring our unemployment taxes down. Put more people to work. We got $6 trillion sitting overseas right now by companies we've all heard of, Pfizer and so forth. Right now, this administration says bring it back at 40%. They're not going to do that. Before they do that, they'll sell those companies and we'll lose even more jobs in America. We're going to repatriate that money at 5% and do it every single year. And they will bring that money back. They will bring jobs back. We will get jobs we lost. We will get jobs we didn't have. Because America now will be the beacon of economic development. And then we're going to allow 100% depreciation on fixed assets. So if you buy a building, you buy a lift, you buy a front-end machine, you buy something to do state inspections with, you can write it off the year you take it. And then you'll make more money next year because you won't have that write-off, and you may go buy something else and put somebody else to work. That's what I'm fighting for every single day. That's what America wants. That's what America needs. That's what they don't understand in Washington because we don't have enough business people in Washington. I want you to know I'm fighting for that every day. So let me say this as I begin to close. Let me empower all of you. I want to congratulate you for being here. I want to congratulate you for getting engaged in this political process. I have so many of my friends, Mayor, say, Roger, I'm with you. Count on me. But I got to tell you, I hate politics and I hate politicians. Hey, I get that. I tell people, being a car dealer, I'm at the 12% approval rate. Now I'm in Congress, I'm at the 8% approval rate. You see? But I can tell you this, I'm not an 8%er. You're not a 12%er. We're 100%ers. So you got to get engaged. You got to engage in the process. When you got things passing legislation like the Dodd-Frank Act and the Consumer Protection Bureau, we need a Government Protection Bureau. We don't need a Consumer Protection Bureau. When you got things passing like that, and you got this administration listing 45 businesses that they're telling banks not to do business with, and one of them is the car lending business, and it's called Operation Choke. This is serious. And the only way we can stand up is we got to get engaged with our sweat, with our energy, and our treasure. And I want to thank you for doing that. But this is what it's all about. Politics is a contact sport. And those of you that don't like politics and like politics, get over it. Get over it. We have to hear from the business community. If we stand up as business people, if we stand up as auto dealers, then we're going to win. But if we don't stand up, the other side wins by default. So that's why I'm doing it. I already got a job. I don't need this. But I believe in my country. I believe in the system. And it's all of us one-on-one. I'm just one guy. And most of you in this room cannot vote for me. I get it. But you know what I can do? I can vote for you every single day on the floor of the United States Congress. So I would just say to all of you, listen, you're engaged. You've got to get your other industry members engaged. You've got to tell them how important this is. This is a serious time for our country. So I like to tell my friends that kind of give me the, I don't know where I am yet, I ask them these questions. Do you want to be a sheep or do you want to be a shepherd? Do you want to be a contender or do you want to be a pretender? Do you want to be a student of the game or do you want to go play the game? Do you want to be a victim or do you want to be a patriot? I know the answer to that. You know the answer to that. But today as we speak here, we got a government that's pitting groups against individuals. Let's be honest about it. They're putting everybody in groups. You're left-handed, you're right-handed, you're blue, you're black, you're green, you own a business, you don't own a business, you got a job, you don't have a job. That's the European mentality. But groups didn't build this country. Individuals built this country. Individual people taking individual risk, individual responsibility, people doing great things built this country, not groups. But today we got groups against individuals and we're having to fight every single day on it. The other thing we're fighting for is whether you want to admit it or not, it's socialism versus capitalism. Socialism. We got people in the administration that they won't own the banks. They won't own the car dealerships. They won't own everything about us, you see. But that didn't build our country either. Capitalism, the greatest system in the world, where you can make 100 and lose 100. You can take a risk and you can be rewarded. It's under attack right now. We got to fight for it. And the other thing is, we're trying to be, are we going to be dependent on the world, or are we going to be independent of the world? We got to decide this. This is important. And I believe that we are at a crossroads. And it's not just, it's going to be all of us as one, as a group to make it happen. So understand the seriousness of this. So when you go back in history, you go back to 1778. 1778, the winter. George Washington pulled those troops out of Valley Forge. And when they left that day, they had blood on the ice. And then you further yourself in history of this country. We had brothers killing brothers in the Civil War. Then we had 30% unemployment during the Depression. And then we lost and had injured more than 1 million of the best and the brightest men and women we had to offer in the world wars. Then we had Korea. Then we had Vietnam. Then we had Desert Storm, Afghan freedom. Then we had 9/11. And then I believe you had January of '09, the biggest takeover of the people by the federal government we've ever seen in our life. And you go back to that, you go back to those days, and each time those people lived in those times said, they stood up and said, I'm going to make this country better than it was before this happened. That's why I believe this is our generation's Valley Forge, to get it right. Not only for ourselves, but our kids and our grandkids. We're not on a 50-year program. We're not on a 20-year program. We're on a 10-month program to get our country back to where we can do business and where business principles outscore big government principles in our country. Winston Churchill said in 1943, in every man or woman's life, there comes a moment, Mayor, when you're tapped on the shoulder to do something great. What a shame it would be for that tap to come and you not be ready for that moment of greatness. And all of us remember 9/11, but we remember 9/12 too, when we're sitting watching television that night. And who came into our living room but President Bush? And this is what he said. He said, we will not falter, we will not fail. We have been tested and we will pass this test. Secretary Bob Gates told me, Roger, sometimes in your life you have to plant a tree that you never stand under. My favorite Bible passage is Luke 6:38. You know what it says. It says, measure will be given to you, pressed down, shaken together, put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back. 1 Corinthians tells us in our lifetime we have to set a cornerstone and lay a foundation. And then I believe, as entrepreneurs, as small business owners, and frankly, as used car dealers, as risk takers, We got to quit talking. We got to quit talking about trying to predict the future. We need to go invent the future. So I would ask all of you when you leave today, I want you to invent. I want you to lay that foundation, set that cornerstone. I want you to give back. I want you to plant that tree. I want you to be ready to pass the test. And I want all of us to be ready for that tap on our shoulder. So when you get up tomorrow morning, I want you to look in the mirror. I want to know what you see. When you look in the mirror tomorrow, do you see a Washington? Do you see a Jefferson? Do you see a Lincoln? Do you see a Margaret Thatcher? Do you see a Reagan? Who do you see? If you see one of them, we're going to win. If you don't, we may not win. It's up to every one of us. So let me just say this to all of you. Thank you for having me here. May God bless all of you. And as my daddy always told me, son, your windshield is always bigger than your rearview mirror. God bless all of you, and God bless America. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.